Welcome, viewer. It is a good morning in Kampala. Apparently today, Kampala temperatures have a bit dived. As we speak, I think it's about 25 degrees, and I'm just going to be so for the next 3 or 4 days. Tomorrow could be even 24 or 23. But it's a nice weather here. People are going up, doing their usual business, and it is very interesting. Welcome you again to this program of the Pan-African Friday. Apparently, we apologized for last week. There was a number of programs that were lined up live, so we couldn't be around, but at least we know you are following those programs, and today we are back here to look at the issues of the continent, issues that concern us, the people of this continent, the people of Africa, and beyond the African continent. So today we are looking at what we were looking at last time, because we were looking at the conflicts on the African continent, how Africa is addressing the issues of conflict, and why all this conflict all the time, like Africa was meant to be, a country of confrontation, of struggles, of fighting and killing and all that. So what makes us that, and are we responsible for all of these conflicts that we are definitely seeing on the African continent? And to me, with me in the studio, I have Ndugu Rugarama, the guy responsible for the Pan-African chapter in Uganda, and also be joined by a Pan-Africanist from Nairobi, also the guy responsible for the Pan-African movement in Nairobi, but also will be joined by Sister Rachel, who is also traveling up country. So we'll be looking at all these issues, but before we come to that, we need to look at the week at glance, what we have seen happen on this continent of Africa, beginning from home. So Ndugu Rugarama, I will come to you. How has been the week, and what have you seen unique happening on this great mighty continent of Africa, other than football anyway?
Yes, good morning, dear viewers, and good morning, Comrade Mututa, and our fellow sister and brother who shall be joining us for this debate. I cannot talk about the week without talking about football. Of course, it is the thing now. Particularly, we are talking about the World Cup, because remember, in between, there are other footballing competitions, but it's the World Cup now in Qatar. I want to point out something. Of course, the Pan-Africanist that I am, after the win of Morocco, the Associated Press pointed out Morocco as an Arab country. They didn't want to say anything to do with Africa. Now, of course, at a glance, if you don't wear inner lenses, it will just pass. It will not be something so serious. But the coach, the national team of Morocco, came up and made it very clear. I'm not here to go into politics of any nature. I'm here to concentrate and celebrate the win of this team, the African team, and he pointed it out that way. So the Associated Press, you could see something which you ordinarily would ignore or even not take serious, or even...
but I think it is not only the Associated Press. Are there no Africans who are saying that, actually to the extent that the team, the captain had to explain that he was there on behalf of Africa? Now, if you are going to tell your children that you are their father, then there must be some background to it.
You see, you are right. You see what has happened actually in the history of the people of Morocco. At one time, there were a panacea to the Pan-African struggle.
Sure.
Algeria, Morocco, all those countries in North Africa. But later, when Morocco went away from the African Union and just came back in 2017, and they had numerous engagements with the European countries and America especially. How? Because you know that Morocco has attempted about 3 times to apply to join the European Union, and
Exactly.
they have been rejected.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, when you come up and mention what you have just mentioned, I see where you are coming from.
Exactly.
Then too, we had Morocco brutalizing for a very long time up to now the Sahrawi Republic, West Sahrawi Republic,
Yes.
which it turned into a colony. And the position of the African Union has been very clear that the Republic of Sahrawi is an independent country and should be treated as such. Actually, Uganda has got an embassy, hosts an embassy of the Sahrawi Republic. Then, when you also realize that the border between Morocco and Spain, there has been a lot of gruesome pictures that come to the African people and the world media, where the police is actually killing in conjunction with that one of Spain, as far as patrolling that stretch is concerned, that there are illegal immigrants who are going to Europe and they pass through that stretch. And they are very, very, very ugly pictures that we do not expect any African country. They are akin to what used to happen in South Africa during the xenophobic episodes that we were talking about. So all those things, therefore, would make somebody who is not an average student of African affairs ask a question: is Morocco really part of us?
Of us.
Even when you go to Casablanca, I had an opportunity to move there one time with the one of the heavyweights in the Pan-African ranks, may his soul rest in eternal peace. And the average woman in the equivalent of a window market would ask, how is Africa?
Exactly.
So they don't have that perception that they are part of Africa. That notwithstanding, the weak, having witnessed the other Morocco coming through to the last 16, and the media, especially the associated media, is the one which came out very vividly to point out that Morocco was an Arab country. I don't deny that, but they are first Africa before they become any other thing. So that captured my attention, and I thought I would share it with my colleagues, the viewers. Then also, of course, we have had a number of still associated to what is happening in Qatar. When you look at the rate of development, I want to believe that although, of course, the genesis is oil, but there is a way they have diversified.
Sure.
And you can, because they take you to other places, and we have got colleagues who are there who keep giving us some of this information. So you get the impression that like the late Muammar Gaddafi was trying to do in Libya, whereby oil, yes, but at the same time turn the country into a green belt and do some other activities. And I think it is also happening in Saudi Arabia. So the week is also captured by the other part away from the sports and the World Cup. There is also the other world whereby countries like Qatar are seriously diversifying into other sectors whereby they can thrive, not just relying on a resource that any time can be
because they're also
exhausted.
trying to look like Africa, to have water, to have forests, to have the rest. But anyway, even with that, I told you I'm not a very good fan of football. Because I don't understand it, or if I do, then there's a lot that I need to work on.
I will interest you because we want Uganda into World Cup anytime soon.
Leave alone Uganda. Even if Africa was given, the irony is, when you look at the average, the players that are playing in the World Cup, have a very big number of Africa represented in those teams. When you talk about your friends from France and the rest, you wonder whether the French people are there. I also look forward when to see an Indian team playing in the World Cup. But
they will go for cricket.
Why I'm saying this is that why can we have only, first of all, as Africa, I think we have the number of teams, not only one team, but incredibly, they get eliminated before. Are you saying that there was also racism in this football thing?
No, you see.
Or the rest of Africa, other than those who have managed to learn the art, cannot manage football, then you go for other things like...
No, truth be told, there is certainly racism in football, no doubt about it. And that's why the campaign over the years has always been kick racism out of football. It has been there. You go to Premier, you go to League One, you go to all these leagues that we are talking about, there has always been racism, no doubt about it. Now, coming to World Cup and the elimination of the African teams, we are about what, 5?
Yes.
5. And we are left with Morocco. Of course, I do not want to say that we are also left with France, because those are Africans. We are also left with Brazil.
But surely France is an African team.
Surely. You see, we are left with Brazil, because that is also Africa. So, the development, and my colleague, friend, Honorable Odonga Oto, had a clip. I have been watching it with a very keen eye. I remember sharing with Honorable Minister, now State Sports, Peter Ogwang, say, you listen to that brother of ours.
He wants to take the Uganda to World Cup.
He was giving reasons as to why Uganda, for instance, has not qualified to World Cup. But of course, those statements may look very simple, and you may want to wash them away.
For now,
but I think we have something to listen to in that clip, and we should take his statements very seriously. And although that does not mean that it is only what he has said that has always limited Uganda as a case study from qualifying to World Cup.
Yes, from the World Cup, of course, a lot has also been happening in the past few weeks or so. We're talking about conflict on the African continent and the possible resolutions that the Africans need to come up with to avoid to settle some of these conflicts that on the continent. And when you look at it at the same time, are we responsible for these conflicts, or is someone pushing us into these conflicts? Now, even before we come to that, I was looking at a number of issues. The other time we were talking about your friend Bia, when he was almost clobbered at a party, the president of Cameroon, when he was having his birthday party in Paris, and where some of his supporters, actually, I think 2 people, I'm told, were killed during that party, and he was attacked. I was wondering, how was a whole president attacked in a foreign country, and was there no protection for the president and his party during that party? But also, when you look at it, I think this man has also been an absentee president back at home. You realize that in Cameroon, there is the English and the French killing themselves back at home, and for the 40 years. This guy has had issues, and I'm told he's most of the time either on a holiday or on a visit or on treatment in France or one of those European capitals. And then you look at that if really, definitely, if you are going to be an absentee president for all that long, then what do you expect? We sit here sometimes and we say the West does not want us good, that the West does not, but far from that, I think we're also partly to blame, because you remember, this guy is one of the puppets, if you can say, of the Western group. And do we think Africa is to be blamed for some of these things, or the individuals who make up Africa are the ones to be blamed?
Last time we were here, unfortunately the show which never ended because we had other programs that came in. Then we promised the viewers that we shall be coming back and discuss this particular topic. And I think it is against that background that we are actually looking at this topic once more. Because somebody probably who tuned in for the first 15 minutes or so would think that we are making a repeat. So making this clarification is also very important. I remember vividly our sister Rachel Takari mentioning, like we all concurred here, that conflicts are not tribal necessarily. They are not unique to a community, if you want, like the African community, but it's something that cuts across.
Yes.
Conflicts are as old as man himself, and they date back time in history. The conflicts on the African continent, if you will permit me historize, are first and foremost dating back before the colonial master came onto the African continent. In the sense that when we even had our kingdoms and chiefdoms, there were inter-chiefdom, inter-kingdom conflicts. Kingdoms would raid other kingdoms. It was not, for instance, uncommon to hear that the kingdom of Dahomey was raiding another kingdom in West Africa.
Yeah, so we can believe that the conflicts are part of us.
Absolutely.
Without someone telling us to conflict.
Even a baby who has not learned anything in this world, inborn, there will be a conflict. In other words, when you look at the history of the Africa as a continent, even before the so-called explorers that came to Africa and then they explored and then they gave the history of Africa to the rest of the world, there were conflicts. There were conflicts at the level of kingdom to kingdom, they would fight. The other kingdoms would swallow the rest of the other kingdoms, and whoever would be defeated, the kingdom would be annexed. There are those that would concede defeat, and then they would sell themselves to other superior kingdoms.
Yes.
There are chiefdoms that would march out of conquest.
Or fear.
There are those that would fear and they would not even want to go into any battle, and they would surrender. We had conflicts at the level of family, that a particular family would be wiped out by another family. Others would join out of, like I said, fear. Therefore, even interpersonal, the people would have conflicts at personal level. So and so is conflicting with another person. This is not something that was brought by the white man, because the white man equally had a set of his own troubles. There were conflicts, as we know, in the rest of the world. There were conflicts in India. There were conflicts in the current United States of America, where the foreigners, these ones who came from Europe, invaded America. They killed the natives, whom they referred to as Red Indians. There were conflicts in Asia, as we know.
So now, then, why do we now, as Africans, believe and blame the rest of the world us being responsible for our own conflicts?
Where the problem stems from is that Africa, generally speaking, has got a unique history in the sense that almost the entire Africa, with exception, as history tells us, of Ethiopia and this one of George Were, is it Monrovia?
Yes.
They were, which are taken not have been colonized, although of course if you asked me, I will tell you my own version, that save for Ethiopia, there was nothing to colonize in Liberia, because Liberia was simply a piece of mass of land that was set aside for the returnees.
For refugees.
Those ones that were being set free to come back on the African continent. So there was nobody who was interested in colonizing them because they were already colonized. As to whether it was resisted, because I don't remember anybody trying to colonize them and them putting up a stiff resistance like Ethiopia and denying the colonizer entry into their land. That notwithstanding, the history of Africa, in as far as conflicts are concerned, save for the other part that I have already mentioned, that conflict is part of human nature, is that we started off by being colonized right from the 1884-1885 Berlin Conference, when the powers that be sat in that part of the world and they started parceling out Africa to themselves, then implementing what they had agreed during that session, that this one is going to be territories of Britain, hence Anglophone. These are going to be the territories for France, hence Francophone. These are going to be territories for Belgium. These are going to be territories for, as we all know them.
Yeah, because then after that, we would expect a situation whereby now that we are independent, we have cut links from those who colonized and definitely took hostage of us temporarily and physically. After we disengaged, we would expect that Africa could now find peace with itself to say, if we were occupied and we were mistreated, we can now be at peace with ourselves and now get on a track for our own development. Why does it look like we even seem to go back to the same people who we claim and we accuse of occupying us to say, please sir, come and help us, we are killing ourselves?
You see the mistake we make. We as political analysts and historians is to think that the colonizer actually left us. That is not true. The Englishman never left his territories, which he was managing, and instead, when he went and formed what we call the Commonwealth, Secretariat and the Commonwealth countries, he got stuck and remained to govern the so-called former colonies in a different way, by way of policy, economic policy, and otherwise. I've always mentioned here to those who would wish to hear that even the Frenchman never left the so-called French West Africa. Not only leaving, because we have sometimes actually trivialized some of these issues by saying that if you claim to be so Pan-African, why do you speak English? Why do you speak French? Why do you speak Spanish? I will tell you that, for instance, Cuba is not necessarily a Spanish-speaking country, but that's the language they decided to adopt, and you cannot take away their credentials as a self-determining country. So our problem is actually not the English that we speak, not the French that we speak, or the Portuguese, or the Spanish. Our problem is that even in that language, there are inherently serious undertones which we do not want to take away from ourselves that we inherited from our former colonizers. I want to conclude this point this way, that the thread that runs through the African continent and the African society, which we have always wanted to extricate ourselves from, right from the pre-1963 Organization of African Union, all the way through the battles, the independence battles that we have fought on the African continent, up to the apartheid, overthrow of the apartheid regime, is clear testimony that we have always, as the African continent, wanted to deal with our own conflicts. It is unfortunate, of course, that time and again we have fallen short of managing our own problems, our own conflicts. Because, like PRO Lumumba has always said, whenever he gets an opportunity, and he gets many of such opportunities, that if our forefathers, for instance, the likes of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, the likes of Kenneth Kaunda, the likes of Barebone, the likes of Keita, the likes of our senior brother Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, Thomas Sankara, you know, if there were Patrice Lumumba, if we were to come back and look at our Africa and the kind of Africa they had in mind, what would they say? That this particular Africa, and you were mentioning here, that you go to Cameroon, the Upper Cameroon or North Cameroon, which is predominantly French, of your friend Paul Biya, is systematically eliminating the English-speaking South Cameroonians in Ambozodia.
You know, what is even more painful is that sometimes we even use the foreign language and abuse ourselves to the extent that we even forget that the responsibility, even at the more advanced level, at the higher level. You remember last time when the people were in which country? Senegal. When guys in Senegal were clobbering them, and these are members of parliament. This we are talking about ministers. We are talking about people who are high in the echelons of society. Now, if we can fight that in that local way, then the issue of conflict, like you have put it, is within us. We may blame, because when we are growing up as kids, when you are fighting a brother, then the father comes and takes away the stick or the stone, and now says, now you fight. Because you are men, you fight. But what is happening here is that instead of taking away the stick, someone is giving you a gun. If you want to fight your brother, now you fight very well. And it's giving the other one another one. Now you are charging in the superiority of the guns that you have. And this is what is happening in Africa. Now, can't we see that there is a problem here, and we sit down as Africans and say, no, I think we can ease ourselves on this. But like you are saying, sometimes is that the colonizer has not left us. Maybe if he left us physically, but has remained with us in the mind. I mean, if the man is going to spend most of his holidays, his time in a foreign country and enjoy his birthdays there, when people are killing themselves back at home, then you can really say that the colonizer has not left us. So the problem then goes beyond who we are into what we believe and what we practice against what we have been taught and we have been told. Because when leaders, some of these leaders come on to power, like we were giving the example of Morocco, is that someone has paid his money for you to be able to do that, has sponsored you, has helped you to become a leader in that country, and then you are not going to go away from that agreement. Maybe that's also part of the problem that Africa has. These foreign interests are not only as seen from the top, but there's a lot that go beneath that. Now, when you look at that, again, it's the leadership of Africa. It's the last time when we were talking here, we said, can we have leadership in Africa that can be sober enough to tell some of these people and say enough is enough? Of course, we have seen people do that. But again, you realize that it shouldn't be the person. We should have, as African, build infrastructure, build systems that will be able to protect the leaders that come now. Because I agree with her when this Chirombo says that you can have a president today, you can talk of this bad president, but tomorrow you'll have another one, he will do exactly the same or even worse. As long as the same template remains, then we are not going to go away from all these problems. At one point, we shall be joined by colleagues from Nairobi, and also Sister Rachel, who is, I think, apparently in Ginger, will be joining us on this talk show. But before we do that, I think there's a lot that, as Africans, we need to digest and look at ourselves from inside. Because is it the problem of failure of leadership? Because we have also seen some of this. When you talk about now your friend in which country is this, who, because most of the people say Africans don't have seasoned leaders, but we have had professors, we have had doctors, we are having all these people who have gone to schools with some of these guys. Your friend in Ukraine, how educated, how powerful has been in the political world. But you realize that maybe Africa, what we need to look at, the systems, the framework, the structures that can help us to achieve what we need to achieve with leaders. A leader doesn't have to go to be a professor of politics or a professor of something, but the commitment of the leaders that we need. Are we missing on that?
There is something very fundamental that you pointed out of the submission which you have just made, and I want to pick it up from there. He said the brothers here on the African continent, the kind of technology warfare that we are fighting, the weaponry that we use, is it ours? That a father would remove a stick from fighting brothers and say, okay, you carry on. It reminds me of the book by Naomi Chomsky, that Jewish American,
yes,
Cold War, Facts and Fancy. There is a statement there which I want to extrapolate and use for my discussion here. He says that if there are not going to be wars on the African continent, we shall make sure that we manufacture these wars for purposes of having our arms sold.
Now, let's have a clip on that. Now that you have mentioned it, you remind me something. I think this Paul gave us a clip of someone who is telling Africa that Africa is going to remain like that. If Africa does not remain like that, the rest of the world will collapse. People will have no resources. People will not be survived. I think our team will be able to give us that clip, and we hear what this guy is telling us, especially the people of Africa, to know what happens.
Designed to say is this: Africa historically, sub-Saharan Africa, has been fundamental to the global prosperity of the advanced countries. Okay? And Africa had a role to play. It has a role as a raw material producer. We will not allow sub-Saharan Africa to escape that. Okay, we do everything to keep sub-Saharan Africa where it is, also impoverished. It's absolutely vital for the prosperity of everyone else. So let's get clear about that. Okay, and this means all the economic structures, all the global institutions, and the economics we teach everyone is all designed to keep Africa exactly where it is. And whether it is Europe or US or now China, it's always the same. We need Africa to be impoverished because we need those raw materials and we need them dirt cheap. Okay, so that's the message. It doesn't mean to say that there's nothing Africans can do. Of course there is. Okay, but this is the opposition that they're fighting. This is what it's about. Because if Africa does do something different, I assure you living standards of all those in Europe and North America and Asia is going to fall. Okay, and that is a big price to pay. I assure you that the West is not going to allow that without a big fight. Okay, so this is what it's fundamentally about.
You hear that, it tells a story, what you are saying, that Africa is not going to be allowed to do what we are talking now. But that does not mean that Africa shouldn't do something. In everything that you do in life, even as a person, there's always opposition. But that opposition doesn't mean that it has to keep you from achieving your goal. So Africa has all this opposition. And it is good that Africa definitely knows that it is not going to be allowed to do what it wants to do. I was talking about structures. Can Africa come up with political systems, structures actually, that can help us, the continent, to achieve its goals? When you look at what the African Union is doing, the systems that the African Union is putting in place, when you look at now the various parts of Africa trying to come together, East Africa, West Africa, South Africa, North Africa, and different chapters, can that help us to achieve what we are talking about today? Can this help us to stop some of these conflicts in Africa? And from this gentleman's presentation, I still believe that definitely if someone wants you to remain where you are, in poverty, in struggles, and forget all your programs, then he has a right, he has a point. So you are making a point to that, and that's why I brought in that statement.
Thank you so much. Actually, this clip buttresses our argument here. This is a white man, and there are very many in his category. When you look at, for instance, this powerful book, about the former World Bank economist,
yes, yeah.
You know very well that he tells it all. He says our structure in the World Bank, in International Monetary Fund, is to make sure that by policy and practice we keep the African continent and the other economies, if you like, in such a state, save for these ones which have come up and rebelled, like China, and they have become superpowers. Even these other economies like South Korea, yeah. Taiwan now, if you dig deep and you analyze, you realize that Vietnam, if the American arm is lifted out, then you are going to have the entire country exposed to the keen eye of a man who will say, this was not you, after all. So yes, I can tell you 101% truly that majority of the conflicts on the African continent, as we know them now, even when the African Union by 2020 claimed that this was going to be a year of silencing the guns,
yes.
We have had
more
from
guns
that time more guns, yes, shouting than there were before. And this is mainly because somebody, it is an industry of somebody elsewhere to make sure that the guns keep crying and shouting, such that the machine, the European machine, the white man's machine, making the warplanes, making the submachine guns, making the bombs, making the bullets and other sophisticated weapons is going to keep, because there are countries that whose economies are thriving on sale of arms.
Exactly.
How are you going to convince such economies to stop manufacturing the arms and make sure that they give and increase the appetite of the consumer to ensure that their arms industry is kept alive and well? So what happens is that majority of the Africa, the conflicts on the African continent, which we largely characterize as a consequence of ideological bankruptcy, is mainly, partly also, I don't know if that is the main part, but partly the explanation can be given from the point of view of the manufacturer of the weapons to sustain that particular country's industry, because there are conflicts which must be fund. You have to fund conflicts. You must encourage coups. You must encourage ethnic cleansing. You must tell the people in Ethiopia that you are Tigrayans and you are better than the rest of the tribes. Forget that you are the minority. You must ensure that in the Republic of Democratic Republic of Congo, right from after the death of Patrice Lumumba up to now, they encourage the sub-ethnicism, that there are tribes which must keep fighting, and you create a cloud of doubt and confusion such that for you can keep digging and extracting the raw materials and taking them gold and etc. timber.
And now, are you saying that the African leaders cannot see that?
Yes. Now, leadership, sometimes we do not get it right. There is a crop of leadership which unfortunately we lost. The leadership that has tried to be in the footprints of the leadership that we used to have of the Kwame Nkrumahs, of the Julius Nyereres, of the Thomas Sankaras, of the Patrice Lumumbas, of Ben Beras, that leadership, that crop quality of leadership, which was resurrecting in the likes of the late Dr. Pombe Magufuli, systematically they are going to be eliminated and the cause of death is not going to be. I'm not saying that we should resign, put up our hands and cry in the middle of the road, like, because from the Pan-African point of view, ours is organized rather than agonizing. I'm not saying that when Dr. Pombe Magufuli dies, when we have got the likes of senior comrade Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, for instance, grow old, is he going to be replaced by somebody of the similar level of ideological consciousness? Are the people around him of that equal kind of standing and understanding? Are we having situations, for instance, in Zambia? I was in Zambia not long ago. I have seen Hekilam, the things he's doing. They border on Pan-Africanism. But is he going to be left alone to execute that agenda? Are we going to have, in Somalia, for instance, the moment, you see, the neo-colonial agenda is structured in a manner that you cannot stand out as an African. You will not be allowed. You can try. There are those who have tried, but I have always challenged my colleagues. I've said, you show me any country on the African continent that has successfully pursued an independent agenda away from the humes and the likes of IMF and World Bank. who has run away from the Bretton Woods institutions and governed that country to push that particular country on a trajectory that is different from the hooks and tentacles of the blueprint as is written by the Bretton Woods institutions.
Okay. Now, you also realize, take for example, the issue of Nigeria with a few ethnic groupings there. You have the Igbo, you have also the relatives of the
Hausa, the Fulani,
the North,
the
and you also
Igbo.
have the... Now, you remember the Biafra War? That one of the main actors of that war, I think as a young officer, I think was then Obasanjo.
Yes,
exactly, who was used by the then authority to crush the Biafra state actors, and he comes on to be the president of Nigeria, but still the conflicts within the country have more actually doubled. You would think that he could have used the experience that with which he crushed the Biafrans to be able to crush the other conflict. I mean, to clear the country of the other conflicts.
Did we also talk about ideological bankruptcy as one of the other reasons as to why Africa as a continent is exponentially experiencing conflicts? Now, what happens is that when a society, when a community like the African community does not appreciate unity in diversity, and it allows a foreigner to tell them that you being a Catholic, and that is even not our religion, you being an Anglican, that is again not our religion, you being a Muslim, you are fundamentally different from each other. In spite of the fact that the challenges, socio-economic challenges, are uniform and they affect us equally. And we start a war as a consequence of, on the heels and as a consequence of religious differences. That bankruptcy, ideological bankruptcy, of not being conscious that there is more that unites us than there is that disunites us, is one of the major reasons as to why Africa is still experiencing conflict. I'm not saying elsewhere that they are better off. In Britain, we know the Anglicans are fighting the Catholics. Those are the battles we have. They have killed each other in the streets. You see, they are not any different. We have had countries in Europe dividing themselves. Is it Herzegovina and the two tribes? And they are different. Now they have very wrong names simply because they couldn't put up together. We have had the highest level of organism and ideological bankruptcy in United States of America, whereby somebody thinks that you being a white, moreover you came from somewhere that is not even your native country, then the black man who also came from somewhere, moreover being brought by you, should be brutalized time and again. So that level of lack of ideological clarity is one of the reasons as to why Africa as a continent has continued. You look elsewhere. Go to Cameroon. Tell me, what is the reason as to why the Paulo Biya's presidency is not recognizing the ambassadorial in the south of Cameroon, and there are those wars? Tell me as to why, for instance, there are conflicts in the Democratic Republic of Congo because of what? These tribes are the same, they are all Africans. Look at the entire African continent and tell me, even in that particular Nigeria of yours, the Igbos, having been given that special attention by the colonial man, the English man, the Igbos, almost over 78% of them are educated.
Yeah.
The Fulani and the rest of the tribes are not.
Just like in Mali, because the same.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So, as a consequence, therefore, the Igbos do not see themselves as being on the equal pedestal with the rest of the tribes.
And
they would want,
as
a result, that the time and again they should be offering the presidency and other forms of leadership. Now, because of the population of Nigeria, which is well over 150, I think, they are, I think, slightly higher than Ethiopia, they have to balance. And that is why, although it is not written, it is an unwritten rule that if an Igbo becomes the president, then the next term should be Fulani, then the next should be, or at least should be a Christian, then a Muslim, something like that.
When we come back, we will be joined by Ndugu Alfred Tutu from Nairobi, and Sister Takali, who is currently in Jinja, as we wind up with this discussion of the conflicts on the African continent and how can we address them, solve them, can we avoid them. Just don't go away. We shall be back shortly after the break.
Protecting your money is as important as earning it. It is for this reason that the Deposit Protection Fund of Uganda, DPF, was established by the government of Uganda to provide deposit protection to customers of regulated financial institutions. In the unlikely event that your commercial bank, credit institution, or microfinance deposit-taking institution fails, the DPF will pay you up to 10 million Uganda shillings. Keep your personal information such as national identification number, mobile phone, or an alternative bank account updated with your banker. Terms and conditions apply. For more information, contact DPF at Aha Towers, Plot 7 Lodell Road, Kampala. Call 0312-206-400 or visit our website at www.dpf.or.ug.
We are the DPF. We protect your money. Protection Fund of Uganda.
The Ministry of Health informs the public that there are confirmed cases of Ebola in Uganda. We, however, urge the public not to panic as the situation is being managed. The Ministry of Health further reminds the public to be on the lookout for any persons who may show signs and symptoms of Ebola. These include high body temperature, abdominal pains, diarrhea, vomiting, bleeding from the body openings such as the nose, eyes, and mouth. Please inform the nearest health worker immediately if you see anyone with these signs and symptoms. To prevent Ebola from spreading further, please take the following preventive measures: regular washing of hands with water and soap, avoid handshaking and hugging, avoiding any contact with any suspected Ebola patients. Any person who dies suddenly should not be buried but reported to the nearest health worker or LC1 immediately. For further information, please call the Ministry of Health toll-free number on 0800-100-066 or send a free SMS to your report on 8500. This message is from the Ministry of Health with support from UNICEF and World Health Organization.
Get value for your money by choosing the right paint. With Global Paints, you don't just paint, but paint for generations to come. Make Global Paints a paint of choice and make your building a paradise. We have weather coat emulsion, undercoat emulsion, silk vinyl emulsion, flat emulsion, super gloss, and high gloss. Global Paint, a reliable product.
Yeah, welcome back, viewer, from where you are following us on whichever platform you are following us. We appreciate your time being with us, and we also learn from you quite a lot as we exchange these views on how Africa needs to look at self and position itself, especially as we now engender the global economy and the global village. Online, we are joined by Ndugu Alfred Tutu from Nairobi. Alfred Tutu is the is the chairman of the Pan-African movement for that chapter in Nairobi. I think he's online. Ndugu Tutu, are you able to hear us? Can we see you?
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I don't know whether I'm audible enough.
Yeah, you are audible enough. We're hearing you and we are seeing you quite right here in Kampala. How is Nairobi?
Thank you so much. We are doing well in Nairobi and in Kenya generally.
Yeah, with
everything is fine.
With the new administration, we expect that you are doing very well, and we expect that we'll be doing well for the next 5 or 4 years. Now, we are looking at the conflict issues on the African continent, and we have been discussing here with Ndugu Garama, saying that part of the problem of these conflicts on the continent are our own making. Do you agree with that view?
Thank you so much. I want to start by saying, now that you mentioned that it's true we have a new administration, we believe and hope that all will be well, though I'm aware that the former Prime Minister, who is a leader that we also respect so much in the country and in the region, has had issues with the current administration. And I think that there are issues that he has raised with the current administration, and we believe as Kenyans that there will be a amicable solution.
Sure.
So back to the issue, I would say that to me it is both ways. One, there are issues that are created by us as Africans, then there are others that have been created by the West. If you allow me, if you look at the types of conflicts that are in the continent majorly, they will rotate around issues to do with the interstate, interethnic, and some of them being liberational in nature, that people want to annex other parts of the country. And I'm seeing those areas. One of them could be probably things like what is happening in DRC, probably I also see what is happening in South Sudan, other people feeling that they should be annexed. And if you allow me to say that some would be maybe based on issues to do with the civil rights, political rights and things like that, like what we also experienced in the Sudan, where people feel that there is a lot of pressure in terms of economic living, high cost of living. So depending on the type of conflict, I want to say that for the internal factors, I would say that it is our own creation, and it is because of inept leadership. And the other thing that is critical to me would be around how our leaders would then want to capture the means of production. And if you remember that famous book of Michael Wrong of It Is Our Time to Eat. So each group of people would then push for their own to be in the leadership, so that they now also try to feel good, in quotes, the way other people are feeling. And to me, internally, this is the critical reason why there are many conflicts. And I would mention this and use many countries and just say that every time we have elections, people will never be satisfied. Yeah. However much elections will be free and fair, people will always feel that if one of their own is there, they are going to eat. And remember, the people who have not won the elections would feel then left out. And these are some of the things that would then lead to issues to do with demonstrations, picketing, and finally resulting into serious conflict. So internally, to me, it will be the leadership. But then externally, if you look at what is happening, then I would say that majorly it is brought about by the Western powers, and I think my senior comrade, Comrade Ramad, said about this, the Bretton Woods. They will put many conditions that may be things that would be not met. So you realize, for example, in many countries, like if you allow me mention an example, like in Kenya, for example, people were used to subsidies initially. Right now, there are no subsidies in Kenya. These are some of the things that are now pressurizing people to demonstrate, to call for maybe picketing and things like that. You know, this has been created by the Bretton Woods, led by IMF and such institution. So the Western powers would then use the carrot and stick strategy to impose some of the things that would be against the normal Mwananchi. And remember, Mwananchi would not know what is going on. Carefully and very, very well, they would lead to conflict.
Sure.
So to me, I would divide it into two. There are external reasons why we conflict, and also internal reasons why to go to conflict. Thank you, and over to you.
Yeah, now before you go, now we are looking at the conflict, and we are saying as Africans, it has also been our nature of conflicting, sometimes fighting for small things and here and there, but also that the external arm has become so strong that has now added to that as a motivation for us to be able to fight. But also looking at the issue of leadership, do you think that Africa cannot raise a grid of leaders that can be able to see these things happen and find a solution without necessarily having to go to war or having to fight?
Yeah, thank you so much, Comrade. That's why I've said that internally leadership is a critical issue. You know, that grid you are talking about is what normally leads to conflict. Like I was explaining that it is our time to eat. You realize that if, for instance, today you are elected into office, today in Uganda for that matter, what would happen is that there are people who surround you, right from your cabinet all the way to your village. Now, these are the people who will be putting a lot of pressure to you. Now, if you are not a transformative leader, you are likely to be tempted to follow such kind of thinking. But if you are a transformative leader, you are likely to stand strong and put your country on the path of transformation. So to me, I would say that it is a strong thing that most of our leaders are likely to take advantage and take us into conflicts. But we've seen also cases whereby you may have some few leaders here and there
Sure.
who can stand strong and put their countries into path of transformation. So it all depends with what you are doing, but we have to agree that majorly the external forces would play a very, very critical part.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll be online. We shall still get back to you, Ndugu Garama, Ndugu Alfred, raising a number of issues, especially when it comes to the quality in terms of leadership. And you know, when he's talking from the point of view of Kenya, you know, Kenya's politics is so much tribalized that a tribe in power is the tribe with power. Every person of that ethnic grouping will find themselves access to State House. And that's why during the campaigns, it came out so well that you have to join a particular ethnic grouping with this grouping to be able to form an alliance that will definitely usher you into State House. Do you think Africa can outgrow this this problem?
Yes, I absolutely agree that we can outgrow it. Besides, by the way, I'm telling you that Africa is blessed in the sense that it has got better ways of managing diversity than the rest of the world. What has happened, unfortunately, is that in the past and gradually, especially from the time of the colonial rule, our strength in diversity has been used by the colonial master to separate us and widen the differences, which are actually not there further. And that is why I was bringing in the aspect of ideological bankruptcy. That things that would ordinarily be uniting us, like clan. You see, the other mistake we make is that we have got that there is a tribe called Banyankore, Basoga, Bagara. These are just clans, really, at the end of the day. And because you see, when you go to Britain, do they have tribes? They will call themselves Englishmen. When you go to America, they will call themselves Americans. But you see, are you saying that they don't have differences within and amongst themselves? They certainly do. I am glad that there is a crop of young Pan-Africans, my young brothers in Kenya, the Alfred Turos, the Orandos, there's a crop there that is appreciating some of these things. And I'm glad that Kenya has advanced in some aspects of its social dynamics. That there are certain things which they are getting right. Of course, each different country on the African continent has got somewhere where they have got a niche, the strength, and we can leverage on that. So there is something that we should be copying from Kenya, and I'm very sure that they also have something that should be copying from us. Now, when we bring all our strength under the East African community, then you can see that we are going to harness that, and then we prepare our subcontinent into to another level. But probably, before I lose this point, can we have a crop of leaders on the African continent that is going to go over and above some of these differences that have created conflict on the African continent? My answer is absolutely yes. Why not? We know for a fact, going to Uganda, by the time the NRM came into power, the political parties were aligned to religion and tribe. DP was solely Catholic and mainly Buganda. UPC was nothing but Anglican. In fact, people like the current Minister of Constitutional Affairs and Justice, Honorable Chairman Norbert Mao, being the chairperson, being the President General of DP, he has met a lot of resistance. Why? Not necessarily that he's a bad leader. I'm not a member of DP.
No, he's not a bad leader.
He's not a bad leader, but simply because...
Is he still a member
oh yeah,
of DP?
sure. He's not just a member, but he's the President General.
Okay.
So, but he's having all manner of fights from his own party simply because he does not belong original, the way they would want it to be, and the way history has had the DP as a political party. The chairman, Mao, according to them, does not fit in, but he has hung in there. And I want to believe that, in my own opinion, he has done a good job. So going forward, we have got, you remember the clashes that happened in Kenya, the 207?
Yes.
Those tribal. The tribal clashes as a consequence of the differences in tribes, whereby the elections would solely be based on, are you a Kikuyu? You have got to support a Kikuyu. So you can see that gradually. And the same thing, what was happening in Ethiopia. Ethiopia for a very long time has been held along unification, that we are all united and we even don't care.
Yeah.
The presidency or the prime ministership has not been provided, has not been given to the biggest tribe. there. Now, and when Dr. Mohammed came on the front, and he even won the Nobel Peace Prize, and he was trying to even bring the different clans, in my opinion, closer. You can see the kind of resistance he gets from the Tigrians, simply because at one time they were just left alone to run the show for a very long time. But now time came and things started changing, bringing the forces closer. That's why I'm telling you that the majority of the conflicts we have had, if it were not for, and where there is no sober leadership, by the way, because you talked about, can we have a crop of leaders that can go over and above?
To me, that's the biggest the issue.
Yes.
Because remember, we are having, we were talking about Cameroon, where a president has been living in France.
Paul Biya is an absentee president.
Since 2014. And I'm told he's living in a Swiss hotel when he goes there at a cost of $40,000 per night.
And do you know the concessions? Do you know the companies, the French companies, which are in Cameroon, and they are mining? As a consequence of his laxity, as a consequence of denying leadership to his own people, the French government maintains him in his place with the cronies around him.
Exactly.
And as a result, they are steadily mining all manner of minerals in that particular country. They don't give a damn what happens to the people of Cameroon. If the Southerners want to be inherited by the Northerners, so be it, who cares?
And we also saw again another president, Sassou Nguesso, who is living in New York in Trump Tower cubicles at a cost about, I think that one was bought, and he claims it was the daughter Claudia who bought it at a very exorbitant. But when you look back in the country, you can see the type of the lives that people are going through. You also remember another family, the daughter of, I think was De Santos, the Santos family with a lot of wealth, and they have tried to stash it here and there to hide it from the public eye, and many other presidents of Africa that are living so. And I think also agree when President Museveni says that some of this is stealing, agreeing that we are stealing anyway, but you rather steal and have it in Africa. Maybe it will be helpful to other people in Africa, because you're not going to make use of it. But you know, we steal all this money, and our leaders, we are helping our leaders to steal all this money, to go and stash it in some of the European banks and the American banks and the American capitals, and then people at home are starving, or they are suffering. Do you think this is now the problem of the West?
I can tell you. You see, the mistake again which we make is to think that some of these issues are only limited to Africa. No. And I'm not saying because they are evenly spread globally, they are okay. Just because we share a problem, I mean, if I'm afflicted, I'm financially afflicted, and you are equally financially afflicted, this is okay. My financial status can be justified simply because my neighbor is also equally bad off. I was looking at these social media people, you know, they have got that Africa is a very interesting country. The levels of jealousy are too much. When power gets off from your house, then you look across and you say, hey, even those ones don't have, so it's okay, because they don't. So anyway, the point I'm making is that you remember at one time, the son to the former Prime Minister of Britain, Margaret Thatcher, who was actually involved in mercenaries. He had a company which would go and fight to remove governments, to destabilize governments, especially on the African continent. And he was one time arrested in South Africa. It took serious interventions for him to be released. So you can see that level, if it was not the son of Margaret Thatcher, it would have been something else then. You see, getting involved in such activities of that nature, really, it does not qualify you as being a superior human being. So what we see here on the African continent, the kind of activities we engage ourselves in, the levels of bankruptcy, you are talking about the Biafra conflict. I should tell you even that the best of the brains that I respect here on the African continent, the likes of Chinua Achebe, for instance, he was a pro-Biafran warmonger. He was interested in having the Igbos separate the secede from the rest of Nigeria. You can imagine that. And we have had quite a lot of people, even here in Uganda, by the way, we have had people drumming up that certain parts of Uganda should get off from Uganda. We have had a situation we talked about it here in Somalia. They wanted to divide that Somalia into smaller parts.
Yes.
And the argument, by the way, even now, internally speaking and being funded by the external forces in Nigeria, is that Nigeria should be subdivided into about 3 countries.
Just like Congo.
You see, then they will argue that the DRC should also be subdivided into different parts. I can assure you that whether you want to divide Democratic Republic of Congo into 2 or 3, if you do not address the core problems within DRC, still the subdivided parts are going to be infested with the same problems, and you will be multiplying the problems other than solving them.
Talking about the leadership, the quality of leadership, the type of leadership, your friend Ramaphosa is on the cross.
Yes, you see, there is one thing I want also to point out in as far as leadership is concerned. When we talk about political parties, there are some countries on the African continent which we must give respect. I think South Africa, the ANC as a political party, should be given a respect. That it is a political party which is not under the armpit of a given individual. This is a political party that offers leadership. Now, you can be a president. We have had presidents from ANC who have been recorded by the party. You know them, and everybody know
friend.
We have had a political party, like I remember at one time before I leave ANC, the Minister of, was it Trade? It's Minister of Trade, I think. He procured bicycles from India at so they say, some exorbitant cost. So they called him and said, but you didn't consult the party. Yeah. How did you procure these bicycles? Either cancel the deal or we'll record you. Now, the maturity of a political party is what we see in some of the political parties like ANC. Although ANC is also troubled, you see there is no institution that does not have challenges. ANC is also troubled, but I can assure you, even when you look at the levels of competition, you see, you remember Ramaphosa and Dr. Dlamini Zuma when they were campaigning to be the president, it was too close that up to now, even the problems we see with Ramaphosa could be as a consequence of that team that was supporting Dr. Zuma Dlamini, our former chairperson at African Union. Very fantastic.
But also
woman.
the other group of the other Zuma who also left disgraced because they believed that he was mistreated. By
that is very true. And you see, again, you have got another progressive force of Julius Marema, which is like, no, ANC, you're not getting it. Actually, and don't forget that the white class took a petition that they want certain parts of South Africa to get seceded from the rest of South Africa. Now you can imagine, the levels of madness are not unique to some given class of people. We also have, anyway, for them, they have always, nobody has a monopoly over madness.
But you also, at the same time, when you moved to Malawi, this man sacked his entire cabinet. And now the vice president was arrested because of the procurement which was done. I think it was a police procurement where the guy, I'm told, he has pocketed about $40,000 US.
That's literal money. People take millions That's little, man.
Just 40,000.
They should forgive him.
400 rather, it's 400,000.
That's little. You see, people steal money, and I'm not, of course, I'm being cynical here. Let the population get me right. I'm not saying if it's a public money, even a shilling, is a lot of it. Why can't people, I mean, was it the former minister of, there was a high-profile member who resigned from cabinet, and he didn't resign. I think he had finished his term, and he was giving a public lecture. Then he said that, you see, if you want to make money without people having to point fingers at you and that kind of stuff, you go to private business.
Yes.
This pay your tax, make your own money, make returns, no problem. But the moment you come into the public domain and you are serving the public, every coin must be accounted for.
You remember former President Trump, as a private person, was never paying taxes. And it was okay, because not many people could follow him. But when he became a president,
it was a different ballgame.
Now that became a different story. Even what you did in private now has to come to the light. So I think what you are saying is true. Of course, we are not saying that private people should not have the responsibility, the obligation of paying the taxes, because that's what they're supposed to do anyway, but that you need to respect public properties.
One thing I like about Africa is that without necessarily being told what to do, society, and the African society at that, has progressively over a number of years gained the momentum and the courage to start purging itself. You see, there is a way, and I wish probably my young brother Turo, Alfred, will talk about it. There is a way society, African society, and Kenya, take Kenya as an example, is cleaning up itself. That, you see, the accountability, the accountability, for instance, you remember when, if we have to look at accountability in the lenses of the white man, the globally accepted tenets, when there was the indictment of Uhuru Kenyatta and Samuel William Ruto, what happened? This guy is simply, when Uhuru was moving to the ICC, he just said, I'm offering myself and I'm giving every power behind, I'm going. Who does that? You see? When we had Dr. Pombe Magufuli saying, you know, it is the culture of African leaders to keep borrowing money left and right, he said, I'm not going to do that, and I'm not going to get onto the plane to go with a basket begging. Who does that? When we had the situation, the Hikrem here in Zambia, when I was recently there, about 2 months or so ago, he was of the opinion that there are certain monies, I'm not going to procure a new set of vehicles for the presidency, simply because the person who was there probably was not my friend. I will still use the same car.
Exactly.
The other resources can be devoted to other forces.
Ndugu Turu, we were talking about the leadership issues, because and we're now looking at part of the problem of Africa. The major one actually is the type of leadership that we have. You remember in Kenya, when you are having your elections, last time campaigns, issues were being raised about the character, the type, the people, the leadership, the responsibility, the accountable leaders in that country. And of course, after elections, do we still have these issues? Some people saying, I told you. Do we have such things now in Kenya?
Yeah, thank you so much. And I would start by saying that manage our, and if you use maybe Kenya as a case in point, the way the institutions that have been put in place to support in the war against issues of accountability, like maybe for this matter, if you take issues of corruption, it was evident in the country that some of the institutions that are in place were being used politically. It's something that is in the public domain, and I would say that at that point in time, what we saw DCI do, the EACC, that is the Anti-Corruption Commission, you could then tell that it is true that some of them were being misused. But having said that, that won't negate the critical point we have been saying that some of our leaders are just not living according to the values that have been enshrined, like in Kenya in the International Values Article 10. There are these leaders who did a lot of bad things and are in the public domain. Some of them killed people. Some of them, we are told that embezzled government money or public money. But unfortunately, from what we see, there were some that were indicted, others were vindicated, and some of them ended up being in the cabinet. We were told by the courts that they were clear, but you know, it is about public perception, depending on where you come from.
Sure.
Ordinarily, people come from areas that are perceived to be supporting politician A, would think the way he thinks. For example, if you allow me use, for example, the people who come from the Western region would not be comfortable with what the courts did by maybe releasing these guys. But if you come from the other side of the country, you'll appreciate that some of these cases were just things that were fabricated and cooked up. So I would say that for Kenyans, as things stand now, we would say that currently we are yet to settle, because depending on the political divide that you come from would make you have different thinking or perception. But then to me what is important is that, like I had my senior comrade Rugarama say, is that if we can then use our institutions the way they were crafted in the Constitution, then I do believe that they are going to work for us. But if they are going to be under the whims of an individual who is going to use them for his personal gain, then unfortunately they are not going to help us. So as far as the leadership thing is concerned, to me I would want to say that personal values count, because the personal values then would drive you to see on what you would think that is good for the country or is bad for the country. But unfortunately, we have reached in a situation where it is believed that if you don't steal from the public coffers, then you are either stupid in quote, if you allow me use that word for
sure.
maybe lack of a better word. Assume that you are like a madman. If you can get where to siphon from, then go and do that. Your village will clap for you. But we are having some few leaders here and there, maybe a new crop of leaders who are emerging, who thinks that that is not good. Just do the right thing, whether it's at night or you are alone, something that will always be in bettering the life of your people. So I would say that we are struggling currently, like any other country, but we hope that the current administration, the way they did promise us, they are not going to use these institutions for personal gains.
Now,
they are going to use them.
You're also raising another important issue. Can we, is it possible in Africa, as a hope for Africa, can we have leaders who can withstand the pressure of their people who say, we have now also arrived, this is our time to eat? Can we have leaders who can stand that pressure, but also be more accountable and responsible to the whole community that they represent, the whole country where they lead?
Yeah, I think that is possible. It may strike a while or sometimes for us to realize or achieve that, but that is possible. That's why I was saying that these things depends on your personal values as an individual. There are people who might believe that do not take earthly riches as something that is important, and there are also this crop of leaders who feel that what I normally call, again in quotes, that the microwave riches. You want to be appointed today, within no minute, you have bought a vehicle, you have flats, those kind of leaders. But there are these leaders who believes in their personal values, how they were brought up. They are very, very principled.
Yeah, because the problem you have there is that as soon as you are appointed, as you become an MP to begin with, but also when you are appointed a minister, that the following morning you'll have a line of people back at your home, those who have their children going to school, those who have lost their relatives who want money for burial, those who have their people who are sick in the hospital. So where does this man get money? And remember, he has just also paid money in the campaigns.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying that it's not an easy thing I have to accept because I live in this country and I see it happens, we are in politics. But then I'm also saying that there are some few leaders who can withstand that. I'm just saying few. So the issue has been that for me, based on what I've seen in the country and in the region, is that for this to be realized, we need a serious civic education, telling people or our citizen what each office is meant for. For example, in Kenya, an officer, an MP would earn around 1 million plus Kenyan shillings. This man, he wants to tell us that he's supporting funerals at home, I don't know, weddings, hospital bills, and the rest. And that office is not meant for that.
Sure.
So to me, if I was to be in the apex of leadership in this country, the first thing to do would probably change how the governance structure is designed in this country. I would want to probably reduce on some of the perks that these elected leaders are given. Because if you're paying people 1 million, they will use all crooked means to get those elective seats. But if you were to pay them, say, 200,000, 400,000, nobody would go for that. They'll remain in the corporate world. So that is what I would maybe think that can really support this country.
Sure.
Elective seats, pay them less. But the corporate world, that maybe there could be a bit of accountability, pay them more. So it is me to decide whether I want to leave my corporate world. For example, if I was working in Kenya Power or Kenya Airports Authority, where I could be earning much more, I'd make a decision whether to leave those perks and come to a public office seat where I'm being paid less. So that is how I'm thinking that for Kenyan situation, we really need to review how they are being paid. These people should be paid less. Once they are paid less, nobody will go to that seat because it is very competitive.
The problem is they are the ones who decide how much they should be paid, and that also becomes a problem. But like we were saying, I think you could also, and which you did say, that part of the problem is that the lack of infrastructure, the framework within which to operate. Because if the framework is that to provide that for a governor, for an MP, for a senator, this is the much you can get for the CS, for the permanent secretary. This, I think, then a person can take a hard decision. You are talking about that. You can decide whether you have this, but where people have the capacity to sit and adjust their salaries upward mainly, because no one has adjusted downwards. I think that's also another big problem that we have in Africa.
Yeah, that is true. I remember during the discussions around BBI, or before BBI, there was Punguza Mizigo, if you heard of that initiative by Dr. Okot. Now, Kura Okot went as far as quoting the salary for these people. Like you say, unfortunately, this could not go through because of the political reasons that are in place. But the best thing in this country is that we really need to review the salary or the perks that are given to elected leaders. It's just unfair. The way the elections are done are about life and death. People believe that they must be elected. So they'll spend a lot, millions of shillings, wooing voters, bribing voters, so as to ensure that they are elected. This happens because of the privileges, the powers, and the perks that goes with these offices. So my thinking would be that if we could think about reviewing this structure or framework, then I think many people would not go for this. I've seen many corporate guys leave their lucrative jobs just to join politics because of the perks and powers that goes with it. So there are some powers and privileges that if you deny these people, you are likely to have very few people going for some of those seats. But if you are continuing pumping them with a lot of privileges, powers, and perks, then we may not realize this. And like you were saying, immediately you are elected, people would come to you demanding for those lodges or goodies. If you don't give them, the following day they start decampaigning you. That's the unfortunate bit.
Exactly.
They start those.
Yeah, the next
those things
they'll begin reminding you about they'll remind you about the next election, and definitely you'll be scared. And Nduguru, we shall come back to you, Ndugu Turu, as we will be winding up. Nduguru Garama, I can pick his point. Is it a problem of the electorate now? We're now zeroing down to where this conflict is starting from. I will now saying that part of the problem are we, the electorate.
Certainly, you see, when we go into the nature of politics on the African continent, which we actually claim, and probably correctly so, is copy and paste the political systems that are of our former colonial masters. I like that word. So yes, that is also true. But what is important here, and I wish I share it with the viewers, is that we have got the African society manifesting all manner of conflicts, and to me, again, what is instructive is the paper that was presented by His Excellency and our patron, the patron chairman Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, to the APRM, in South Africa, about 2015, 2016, around there. And he pointed out areas where Africa has got very serious issues to address. He talked about the ideological bankruptcy. He talked about the fragmented or balkanized states. He talked about the undeveloped infrastructure. He talked about the issue of intertrade, that we don't trade enough amongst ourselves.
As Africans.
Yes, he talked about the undeveloped agriculture sector, where we have a niche, but yet we are not at a level where we're supposed to be, whereby we have got well over 65% of our land being arable, and yet we are importing. We have a food net importer. We are talking about, he raised the issue of the civil service, said the less skilled civil service. He looked at the issue of the weak armies. So when you get, and there were about 11 points, I've just mentioned about 7 of them. Now, when you look at the congregation of all these areas that he talked about, and it was adopted and even forwarded for adoption to the member states for purposes of forming a fulcrum around which solutions could be developed. So when you look at all these issues that were raised in that particular paper, the 11 bottlenecks of Africa, then you realize that what we are trying to do now, in a way, because we are also requesting us in this debate that we look at the possible solutions. When you look at now what is happening by way of regional groupings, the ECOWAS, East African Community, the COMESA, the And then you look at these other structures like IGAD, and then finally you look at the Africa Free Continental Trade Area. You can see that we are now gearing towards addressing some of these problems. And that in a way is good. You see, it becomes very difficult. For instance, how is Cameroon going to be fighting with Nigeria when they are trading together? Because they are going to hurt themselves. How is it possible that Rwanda is going to be fighting with Uganda and closing borders when business is booming? You see? Because at the end of the day, somebody will think twice. I'm not saying that doesn't happen because the border was closed not long ago. And somehow it took the reasoning and the sensitization from some quarters for the border to be reopened. But we know who suffered. So the point I'm making really here is that yes, we are beset with all these challenges that have created conflicts, and the majority of these challenges are found or can be traced back in the pre-colonial. Then colonial was a master. Because during the colonial time, we experienced a lot of conflicts. And when they handed over the states in the manner in which these respective countries were handed over, the structure, political, socio-economic structure was never interfered with. And mind you, and all our viewers, the left structures were never intended to suit the purpose of the African man. No wonder, therefore, that the army, the police, and other related aspects of life that were left on the African continent in their respective countries were such in a manner that they would be acting as a conduit for purposes of continuing to siphon and enable the easy flow of the administrative instructions from our former colonial masters. And that is why, for instance, you will find that we are not training our own police, we are not training our own army, we are not arming our own army, we are not training our own army.
What's the problem?
We are not doing it simply because...
Even with the colonial lingering issues, can't we do that?
Yes, we can. We see, I'm giving a larger picture.
I'm saying so. Didn't we even have armies?
I'm giving a larger picture. I am saying that, largely speaking, the African continent is not doing what it is supposed to be doing simply because of the strong attachment that has not been, that umbilical cord has not been broken, and simply because the East Royal colonial master has made it a point to make sure that it is not broken. When, for instance, West Africa, you remember, when the West African 14 countries or so wanted to break away from the French by establishing the eco currency, you know what happened, and they were admitting Nigeria. You know what happened. France came running because there is no way they can all of a sudden now allow that the entire French West Africa gets disconnected from France because they know how it is going to impact on the economy. Yeah. There is no way.
Two things. You are the one who has been saying this thing, that you need to put on the extra lenses to be able to see the graftiness of the white man, if that's the word. But also that you also now need to even to put in extra lenses to see the invisible hand in all this, because France, for example, knows that if it does that, the umbilical cord, like you said, will be cut. No wonder they had even to go ahead to say we shall be the ones now to guarantee the currency, because they know they will. But my concern here is, can't we, for once, as the Africans say, I think enough can be enough now, and we have somewhere to start, that we stop blaming these people for our own short-sightedness, but also to allow ourselves do things that concern us more than waiting for someone to come and be able, because they are sponsoring, they are funding the conflicts, but also they are funding. So can't we see this happen?
Yes. Now I will tell you this. You see, Africa is becoming of age. How? We are also now playing double standards, because the powers, the superpowers, if you like, is no longer one. Actually, we are no longer relying heavily on our former colonial masters. What happens, I will give you the example of the Africa Free Continental Trade Area. You will find that we have gone into an arrangement with China, for instance. Now, when you look at our arrangement with China, it is such that that trade pact agreement that we have had will be, if we follow it to the letter, it is going to make a lot of sense vis-a-vis what Britain has so far done. It has already advanced 30 or 35 million US dollars to the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. And the purpose is very simple, to be able to have an influence, to have a controlling hand. But you see, it is bringing that money, she's bringing that money, that is Britain, bringing this money against the backdrop of the hand that has been stretched by China. Now, when you have got competing interests, the African man is going to benefit because he's going to be looking at who offers me the best alternative.
Yeah, but of course, like Nani said, if you are a beautiful woman without a brain, then you will suffer.
This time around, it is not the private parts of Africa that are going to suffer, but we are, because we have now developed a better brain than we even had before.
If we cannot have that brain, then definitely the private parts of Africa, which are now going to be the common person in Africa, is going to suffer. Ndugu Turu, you will give us your closing remarks on this conflict of Africa, and then we'll proceed and get back to you next week for other discussions.
Thank you so much. I'll start by just to support what Senior Comrade has said, and just say that to me, in terms of way forward, one, we really need to redefine some of our definitions, especially in regard to things to do with accountability and democracy. My understanding is that if you are going to continue to define or describe democracy in the language of the white man, then I think we are going to have more conflicts. And I'll give an example where you realize that some of those states, a person would be in leadership for, say, 4 terms, like now Angela Merkel, and to them that is normal. That is not an issue. But in Africa, when you stay for more than 2 terms, it's a serious issue. So what is important is, how do we redefine our democracy? I see what is happening in China. Nobody has an issue with the leadership. What is important is the leadership responsive to the needs of the people? The other thing I wanted to also share is that Senior Comrade has said, Rugarama, some of these bodies that we are talking about, be it the African Union, the African Development Bank, and the rest, until such a time that we stop depending on the white man to stop contribution, these people are still going to dictate what happens in the country. You look at African Development Bank, 90% of whatever is contributed there comes from some of these countries. And that is why they dictate what happens in the country. And to me, if we can agree as African countries, then we can then agree on how we are going to maybe determine the trade deals and agreements that we normally have with some of these countries.
Sure.
For instance, if Uganda is going to negotiate as Uganda at the expense of East African community, then expect the Britain or the Americans to really take advantage of them. I think that we've reached such a time that we now must negotiate as a community, that is EAC or ECOWAS, among others. And lastly, there's something we did discuss with the Rugarama in Zambia, is about how we again restructure some of the African institutions, the African Union institution. For example, the PAP. It can't be that all the time it is the Francophone that have to take the leadership in that place. So if we are not going to think about all these things, then people are not going to agree.
Yeah, sure.
So I strongly believe that we must think around this thing, if it is going to be rotational presidency and things like that, and also relook at some of the people we sent to some of these institutions, be it the EALA, the East African Legislative Arm, or the Pan-African Parliament, we must then look for the crop of leaders that will be sent to those places. It is not about cronyism. It is not about taking your girlfriend to such institutions. And then we must agree on now we are going to then restructure these institutions. Then lastly, is about the same white man who is using some of our African brains to lecture us on what we are supposed to do. If you look at some of the guys who normally take a leading role in lecturing us about democracy, and some of these guys, they are in the payroll of the white man. So to me, if we agree on how we are going to define what democracy means to Africa, we are still not going to come out of woods. Otherwise, thank you so much for this opportunity. And I look at a situation where we are going to have now maybe a strengthened Pan-African Day.
Thank you so much, Ndugu, and thank you so much for your participation in this program. Definitely, we look forward to having more engagements with the chapters of Pan-Africans on the continent and also beyond the African continent. Thank you so much. Ndugu Rugarama, your closing shot on the issue of the conflicts on the continent.
I will simply want to share with our viewers that the problems, the conflicts on the African continent have not just started. They could have just been precipitated by colonialism and then now the neo-colonial project. The bottlenecks that beset the African continent have also increased on the conflicts of the, within the African continent. I'm glad though that the African Union, which some people have described as a toothless dog and some have said it is no dog at all, has had its own impact, positive, and I'm looking forward to a time because given the trends now, where the conflicts on the African continent are not just going to be reduced, but drastically reduced.
Sure.
And as such, therefore, I am confident that going forward, the African continent is on the correct trajectory to dealing effectively using homegrown solutions to the African conflicts.
Thank you. Thank you so much, a viewer who has been with us from all this time, from 9 in the morning up to now. So it's a long time sitting and watching and listening to us. We thank you for that time and we appreciate your participation in this. We also wish you continue watching UBC because there are more programs coming up, more educative programs that are coming up after we leave the studio. But we thank you for the time, and next Friday we'll be back here for more discussions. This time I think it's going to be a very hot one, and I definitely invite you not to miss that one as we close the year. Please be with us. Thank you so much for your participation and thank you for watching UBC.
Our mission to secure your money.
Protecting your money is as important as earning it. It is for this reason that the Deposit Protection Fund of Uganda